I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I don't want to be writing this is not a breakup book.
Right.
Okay. This is a book that shows you, one, first of all, loving yourself is very possible, very simple, very doable. Second, it shows you exactly how to do it in a way that's just almost systematic. It's almost like here's the manual, right? Just very simple how to do it. And there's no bubble baths or candles. It's internal work, right? It's like internal mastery, right? And which is actually way easier than we think. And the third is, here, let me show you actually how I've done it when I fell apart and I had to reapply this all over again from scratch to basically rebuild myself. Let me show you the inside. And it doesn't matter what the external was, what the reason was, because we all go through things that are hard for us. That doesn't matter. What matters is the internal work.
What was like the first exercise you did? You realized, okay, you're known for the book Love Yourself. You realized you were somehow disconnected from it during this period. What was the first exercise you did to get yourself back on track?
Well, the funny thing is, this experience, and I share it, I was so deeply embarrassed at myself for letting myself get here internally, for falling apart like this. Because I know better, right? I should have been doing the work. I know better. And regardless of the amount of pain I was in, I knew better. Yet I wasn't doing it. And so I didn't go about it the way I should have. And I write about them. And even though I didn't, it still works, right? It goes back to the very basics. Here are the fundamental basics of loving yourself. The first is forgiving yourself. You got to forgive. If you're going to go into the future, you got to let go of the past. So I have a very simple exercise that I do to forgive myself.
What were some of the things you had to forgive yourself of?
Fucking excuse my language, anything, okay, man.
Kamal, this is the moment I've been waiting for like 6 years. 7 years.
7 years.
7 years. Your book came out, your first book, which was you published like in your garage or whatever, and you uploaded it to Amazon. It sold how many copies did that first self-published book sell, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, I can say anything. I think it sold close to about 500,000 copies.
500,000 copies. I remember for a while you were paying your at least it was enough to pay rent, the amount you were making every month, rent and then some. That was like it could have been like what you were making per month, because I knew the numbers. What you were making per month would have been like, for me when I first moved to New York, like triple my salary.
Yeah, it was amazing because that was when I had lost everything and I was starting from scratch. Actually, I was living off credit cards, and I put this little book out and it took off. And I started paying my rent and my living expenses in San Francisco, which is not a cheap city, and I didn't live badly either. It was amazing.
No, and I remember, well, first off, you had self-published it. Came out even a year before Choose Yourself, and I was all about self-publishing. You self-published it rather than wait the year and a half or 2 years it would take to get through an agent, a publisher, an editor, a marketing department, bookstores. You just wrote it in like a week or two.
A month.
Uploaded it to Amazon, and then it was like a mega hit. How many reviews also do you have on it?
Close to 4,000, I think.
4,000. So I remember one time a major publisher told me, if you get 1,300 reviews, your book is going to live forever, meaning it'll always be selling every month. And so 4,000 reviews, your book is going to be living forever. And I guess the idea is with that many people passionate enough to review it, word of mouth will continue to spread forever. So in 4,000 reviews, that's more than like anybody. I mean, I don't know of any other self-published nonfiction book with 4,000 reviews.
You're close, aren't you? Choose Yourself?
No, I'm about 2,000.
I think you're
half
closer
the
to
reviews
three.
of you.
I think you're closer to 3.
No. I know exactly. It's 1,968.
All right. Well,
as of this morning. I check my reviews. Do you check your reviews? I've stopped checking my Amazon rank. It doesn't matter anymore, but I check my reviews
I
occasionally.
go read them, and sometimes I'll answer. Sometimes
that's
I'll
good.
leave a comment there. I wish you could directly respond to the person, but you can't, so I'll just leave a comment there sometimes.
I hate when they put like a review that has nothing to do with the book. They just like don't like something else I've done, and they give the book a 1-star review. But now you have enough reviews that 1 star or 5 stars, nothing really changes the average. Although I don't like it when they're recent. Anyway, you get obsessed with reviews and rankings when you first publish a book, but now Love Yourself lives forever, so you don't get. But now this new one just come out. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It has the same title, and now this is with a major publisher, HarperCollins. What was the process? Why'd you go from a self-published book to taking the exact same book and publishing it with a major publisher? How did that happen?
It's not the exact same book. It's significantly expanded. It's like 4.5 times the size. Now, size doesn't matter. I mean, size, in books, actually, for quality of content, right?
Call-ins are welcome on this.
Right. So for quality of content, actually, it's the content itself that matters, right? So the first book I wrote, the first version, I wrote what I wish someone had given me when I was down, and it worked, like based on what I did to really pull myself back up. And I didn't have it. I didn't want to write any more on it. I didn't want to, I had publishers chasing me for years, and my agent was after me for years. And I think he stopped talking to me. He was mad that I wouldn't sell it because I was like, look,
yeah, they need to make money, Kamal. You can't just have these conversations with them.
And because publishers once...
they don't like you. They just want to publish the next version of your book.
Well, they can't publish a small book. They can't make their money on it. They can't charge the amount that they normally do. And I refused to actually do that. This book was going, I was literally saving lives. I was getting emails from people that had like stopped them from killing themselves, or so many people that like changed their lives. And the thing is, I get all these emails from readers. So I have like thousands, if not tens of thousands of emails from readers over these 6-7 years. And there's a pattern, right? So a lot of them very kind, very, thankful, very wonderful. Then I also get questions. And I start to see a pattern in the questions. And I realized there's 2 reasons why I expanded this. The reason number 1, I realized that, look, I need to answer these questions. They're all coming up for the same ones are coming up for a reason, because I didn't go deep enough. I didn't expect it to take off. Remember, we talked about this. I expect no one to buy it. Like, I just put it out and I was going to give copies to friends.
It took off so fast. I remember it. First off, a couple of things on what you just said. I don't know if you probably do know this. I don't know why I know this. The book itself is 8,000 words. Okay, so the average book that a book publisher won't sign a deal with you unless you promise 60,000 words, right? So like your deal with HarperCollins probably said it needs to be between 60,000.
No, I was very adamant. It'll be what I wanted, exactly what the book needs to be.
But if you had sent them 9,000 words, they would have sent it back to you.
No, the draft that I finished as sold them was close to 40,000 words.
Okay. But you, back in 2012, you changed for me what the definition of a book was, because your book was only 8,000 words, it's like a pamphlet practically if you just count the words, right?
Mhm.
But it was treated by the public because you self-published on Amazon. You showed it doesn't matter how many words a book is. It was valuable. It had the key insights you wanted in there. And I think most books are 60,000 words of fluff anyway, because just
Yeah.
to satisfy the publisher's contract. But it's just like TV shows. Everyone thinks, oh, a TV show is either a half hour or an hour, but you could change the definition. A TV show could be 6 minutes. A movie could be 27 minutes. And a book, like you showed, could be 8,000 words. Like we kind of, the reason it's always 65,000 words in a publisher's mind is because that's what the book publisher, that's what the bookstore wants. If they're going to put it on its side and show the title on the spine, it needs to be 65,000 words. So it's thick enough to, and by the way, if it's 120,000 words, it's too expensive to print. So they can't have that either. So the size of books have been dictated by the needs of either the printers or the bookstores. And you were kind of saying with your first version of this book, hey, 8,000 words, that's what I want to say. That's a book. And then it did just take off at that point, and it never stopped.
Well, and I'll say for nonfiction, because I've also written fiction, right? For nonfiction, if you're trying to get a point across and really help and share something of value, it's the quality of content that matters, not the quantity, right? And so that's something I struggled with expanding this, because it was like, I didn't want to expand it for the sake of expanding. I refused to. It was doing just fine. I didn't need to, right? So I started to work on answering these questions. That was like a year-long process. I've gone through many, many drafts. And I realized in the process of answering these questions that the first version, I didn't go deep. And like the people was struggling because I didn't share with the questions I was getting consistently. The certain questions kept coming up again and again, was the fact that like, look, I didn't share the whole thing. I need to go deep. And also I need to also create a structure that people could just follow.
What do you mean? What do you mean you didn't go deep? Because
there's nuances. There's a lot
Like
of
what?
nuances that I didn't share. That for example, like, what happens when you first start doing the practice and how the mind rebels and what to do about it.
All right, so let's stop there for a second, because let's explain what the practice is. So the book was called, just like this book, it's the same book but expanded. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. There's a lot different in this book. I agree with you. We'll get into that in a second. But I remember at the time you were sick, and I even visited. We had never even met yet, but we had emailed over the years like dozens and dozens of times. And I was going to go meet you and your brother and a couple other people, and you just didn't show up, and you didn't even respond to your brother's emails. And finally, fortunately, the day we were going to head out of San Francisco, we met in the lobby there, and we met.
The W Hotel, I remember that.
But you were sick, and you were like literally out of action. You were down for the count. Like your business had gone bad. Other things had gone bad. The stress was affecting your health, and like you describe in the book, you were like barely could get out of bed in the morning. You were depressed and physically unwell. Like other diseases and illnesses were coming up. Like what was going on? Like that led you to this
Disease
bottom
and
point.
illnesses, plagues and locusts.
Yeah, all these diseases were popping up all over your body.
I don't know about that.
You were like a leper. But you kind of were, because you were gone. You weren't leaving your house.
Yeah, I was just in a bad place. And what got me out of it was something really interesting. It was like making a decision that I was going to get out of it. And how I did it was I actually sat down and wrote a vow to myself. And I really do believe in the transformative power of commitment.
You wrote it down on paper.
I wrote it down on paper. And what surprised me was this vow that I wrote, which was a moment of desperation, was a vow to love myself. It wasn't a vow to get better. It wasn't a vow to get out of it. It came from somewhere deep within me, and it was a vow to love myself.
Well, did you feel like you weren't loving yourself?
I didn't even know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what surprised me, that's what came out. It's almost like something deep within me knew that I needed that. And also, something deep within me knew that if I make a vow, I'm sticking to it. Like I almost have like this mental thing where if I make a commitment, I literally see ships behind me exploding. I have this image of ships behind me. There is no going back. If I'm committed, I'm in.
So what does it mean? Like I sort of feel like I sort of understand what you mean, but like if I just say, oh, I love myself, there's lots of questions. Like who am I loving? My behaviors? Am I loving something deeper inside of me? And I'm not trying to be kind of superficial about it, but what does it mean to you to love yourself and to make that kind of commitment?
Well, at the time, I didn't know. I had no idea. All it was I was basically trying to save myself. I was in a really bad place, and this vow came out of nowhere, and I had to go and figure it out. Now, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't sit down and read books on it. I didn't watch YouTube videos or anything. I just basically sat around and thought, okay, I made a vow, so I got to do this, and so I got to figure it out. Now, one thing I know is like as far as improving yourselves go, it's an internal thing. It's like the mind and the heart. It's like working on the inside makes you better. So rather than working on the outside, I started working. I wasn't sitting around taking bubble baths and lighting candles and incense. I just started working on my inside, on my mind. I just started trying every crazy thing I could think of to make myself start to love myself. And because I was doing it obsessively, very quickly I started to notice things that we're doing that started to shift my mind. They started to shift it a little bit. If it shifted it better, I kind of went down it. And if it kept working, I kept going further. If it didn't, I just threw it away. I didn't care. It was like a clinical.
So what things were you trying?
I don't remember, man. It was 7 years ago. Any crazy thing you can think of. Someone said, sit there and try to figure out how to love yourself and all the things you're going to try on the inside. I've been through them.
Because you give lots of specific exercises in this version of the book now.
Yeah, because
you didn't give specific exercises in that book.
Because this is what was left, what actually worked. And so I came down with like basically what worked. I started doing it now on a regular basis, and it just really worked put together. And actually, that was one of the failings in the original version. I didn't show how to like basically have a system, like a real system with just basic things to do fundamentally on the inside that don't take much time as part of your regular act of living and breathing as a human being on this planet that actually cause you to start feeling love for yourself. And when you do, what's really interesting is your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings start to arise from there. It's almost like your internal state starts to shift. And all it is, in the end, is a state shift. Because when you shift your foundation that you're expressing yourself from, you shift and life shifts. It's really, really interesting how your life changes when you do that. I didn't expect that. I learned that by experiencing it, but I was literally just trying to save myself, and I didn't know how. I didn't even believe in like loving myself. I mean, I never took a course on it. I didn't go to college for it. I studied economics and biology. Like neither one of them has classes on loving yourself. I don't have a YouTube certification on loving myself. I was never that guy. I'm a guy who does stuff.
I guess people grow up. This is that whole thing where people grow up very goal oriented, right? So you start off first grade, and the goal essentially is to get A's until you get into 12th grade, which by then you're getting into a good college. And then you go to college, you're either getting into a good graduate school or you're getting a good job. And then you're supposed to get a family, and the kids are supposed to do well, and the cycle for humanity repeats. But no one at any point says, okay, if you're going to maximize your personal, very short experience on this planet, you have to love what you're doing from the inside out.
This crazy being that you are. It's look, I've been in places where I haven't, and I've been in places where I have. And let me tell you, it's far better when you're loving yourself.
But
the experience of life is better.
Do you feel like you were outsourcing that love to other conditions or people? Like for instance, you had a business that was going, you were outsourcing, like maybe I'll love myself when that business succeeds, or maybe you were in a relationship, maybe I'll love myself when this relationship works out.
Well, I can't say I was thinking that way. I was never thinking I will love myself. I don't think most of us do. Most of us don't think in those terms. It was more of our sense of self, our sense of well-being, our sense of self-worth, our self-esteem, all these things that are tied into loving ourselves. If loving yourself is a foundation, these things naturally rise from there. Those were definitely tied. Like when my business fell apart, I fell apart. My entire sense of worth, my ego, was tied into that business.
Did you raise money for that business?
Well, I self-funded it for many years until I ran out of all the money I'd saved, and I'd made good money for 10 years. And then I raised money, and it was like, somewhat of a who's who. And like a lot of people, this was expected to do really well. So I had all that pressure, right? And when it blew up, I kind of took it so personally that I blew up with it without realizing the fact that, look, I worked my ass off. I gave it my all. That's the best you can do in a business is give your all, especially in tech businesses with in the industry I was in, it's like there's so much luck and involved because there's so many big players and how they move chess pieces, and you're just a small pawn, and one piece gets moved, and there's a downstream effect, and all these pawns just get washed out. You don't think about that. You just think about I failed versus no, I gave it my all. The business failed. Very big difference. But when your ego is tied to the result of this external thing, if it fails, you're gonna go with it.
Yeah, totally. Like, and particularly, you were living in Silicon Valley, the home of tech billionaires. Every business supposedly turns into gold, and your business was doing well for so many years, and then suddenly, because of various things, it collapses. And there's a big ego thing. Like everyone does look at you and say, "Oh, he's a failure," and that's depressing.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I don't know if people look at you and think that. It's more like we do that ourselves.
I think people also look at you and think that.
I don't
I
think
think there's
so,
a
man.
Schadenfreude kind of thing where they're happy you fail a little.
I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I think most people are better than that. And I didn't get that sense
Okay.
because, like, what I didn't get that sense. I actually think people are better than that, honestly.
I don't think people are.
Yeah, I've actually, one thing I'll tell you, putting this book out to the world, it just taught me how good and kind people are. Just how many people reached out to me afterwards and just what they share with me. That's actually another reason why I did this expanded version, because it's amazing what people share with me about their lives. Like stuff I bet you that they're like their closest partner doesn't know. They'll email me and tell me.
Well, it's
Right?
funny because there's nonfiction books that educate people, but no one goes up to a writer of a history book and says, "Oh my God, you've changed my life." But with a book, and also I think with self-help books, most are so blah with kind of like regurgitated advice that no one's ever tried. Or there's a category of self-help books which are academic based. So research shows if you do this, this, and this, you're probably going to be less shy than other people in social situations, and then you'll be happier 36 days later. Like I don't like those kinds of self-help books either, but I feel like with Love Yourself, and to some extent with some of the books I've written, people will come up to you and say, your book had an effect on me. And I think that is valuable regardless of the number of copies sold.
Oh, it's beautiful. And one thing I realized how I was shortchanging my readers was when they shared me a lot of their stuff and what they were struggling with, I've been through those things, but I never shared them. And in this version, I decided to, and look, I'm scared about people knowing things about me that, like about my childhood and stuff that I don't really need people I know to know, right? But why do I do it? Two reasons. One is because I want people to know they're not alone, right? This happens to more people than you realize. Two is to show them how I overcame it using this loving myself practice. All these things, no matter what the details. And, I was joking with someone like, all right, if you want to look at shitty childhoods, I can check off a lot of boxes except maybe Civil War, and it's like, but look, what I look back at now is thanks to this, significantly thankful to loving myself. It's like, look back at this child and just feel like gratitude to this child for surviving and getting through so I could be the man I am today. And I share how I've done that, in this book, purely because I know so many of my readers what they were struggling with. And I want to share with them, like, look, no matter what happens, no matter what we've been through, it's like who we become, who we choose to become, and how we approach ourselves with this filter, so this foundation. It transforms everything. So we don't have to be victims of our past. We can be heroes of that story.
Right. So I want to get into that and some of the specific exercises you give that have helped you towards loving yourself. But I think what's interesting is back in 2012, you were in this point where you were depressed. It was keeping you from getting out of bed. And then it was triggering illnesses that were further keeping you from getting out of bed. You were like, again, knocked out.
I love how you say illnesses.
I'm trying to avoid like the plague, but it's true. And
for people's firstborn kids were dying,
and it's not as if loving yourself helps you forever. It's like, okay, now I'm cured. It's like, this is a practice you have to keep doing, because I've seen you since then, whenever, life is hard, and whenever things falter, you have to remind you always remind me, you always call me and say, are you doing your practice? Whenever if I call you and I start saying this, and this, rather than giving me advice, which is really what I wanted from you, you would say, "Are you doing your practice?" And I'm like, "Oh, I knew he was going to say that again." And for you, I've seen you since the book first came out go through lots of things, and I think that's what led to the expanded material in this book. Like, what were some of those things that?
Yeah, there's a lot more. First of all, I've grown as a human being. I've grown as a writer, so I can share more in a way that's helpful.
Well, like, what were some of the things that got you down where you had to really remind yourself, and you maybe even refine the ways in which you were, saying to yourself, "I love myself."
Yeah, because it wasn't just saying it's that's why there's a practice. It actually creates a way of being. Look, I think the fundamentally the worst, the stupidest thing I've done over the years is eventually I'll get lazy. I'll start getting really good at it. I'll get lazy and I'll coast. Where I'll just slow down the practice. And it's like going to the gym. If you've been overweight all your life and then you just make a commitment to get in shape for a year, you go every day, you go to the gym, you eat healthy, you get in great shape. But say 2 years later, you just say, I'm going to eat bonbons for a while and just watch TV. What's going to happen? Your body's going to revert a bit.
I wish you hadn't told me that. I've been going to the gym. Do I have to do this forever?
Same thing with the mind, man. Like, it's like, look, going to the gym is great. It's a way. We're also animals. We walk around with this brain that's stuck in our head all day, but we're also animals that need to move. I'm a big fan of going to the gym. And same thing with the mind. We got to always be working on the mind because otherwise it's an untrained monkey. So that's just running the show.
What was specific? So you coasted, and then what was specifically happening to you that led to? You said this is very different, and I know it because there's expanded content. There's more storytelling in this. There's a lot more situations that you had to deal with. What were some of those situations that you specifically deal with? What's different? What's more?
Well, look, in this book, I picked a particular one, right, and I showed it where I went through a really, really hard time. And I kind of fell apart here.
And it was a breakup. It was a romantic breakup.
It was a breakup, but a very significant one, very difficult one. And
what was difficult about it?
Because this is someone I love so much, still do, love so much that I just couldn't believe it was happening. I couldn't get over it.
Well, you couldn't believe that she no longer wanted to, at that moment at least, spend her life with you. You couldn't believe you weren't going to spend your life with her.
What was happening, and look, before we get lost in the details I don't want to be writing this is not a breakup book.
Right.
Okay. This is a book that shows you, first of all, loving yourself is very possible, very simple, very doable. Second, it shows you exactly how to do it in a way that's just almost systematic. It's almost like here's the manual, right? Just very simple how to do it. And there's no bubble baths or candles. That's your thing. It's internal work, right?
Not my thing specifically.
Yeah,
but
it's like internal mastery, right? And which is actually way easier than we think. And the third is, here, let me show you actually how I've done it when I fell apart and I had to reapply this all over again from scratch to basically rebuild myself. Let me show you the inside. So it's not like, and it doesn't matter what the external was, what the reason was, because we all go through things that are hard for us. For someone, it may be something else, going through a business or a health diagnosis or this or that. That doesn't matter. What matters is the internal work. So I picked this thing because it was raw and real and honest, very honest. And at the same time, showed exactly how I'm applying it to get better. So it's almost like, here's how you look. One's convince you it's possible. Two, here's how to do it. And three, here, watch it in action. And that's where actually I can also show the nuances involved. All the different nuances, the internal things that come up that you deal with. Because the mind just jumps around. Mind does this thing. I could be loving myself today, but tomorrow it could be just all over the place because of whatever, something external happening, or it just remembers something painful, it goes all over. And how do you keep working on it? How do you keep working on it? And how that builds and builds and builds. And that part, it's a true story. In fact, every single word in this book is true. When I was HarperCollins, the editor, when I was going through their initial edits, she had put in some stuff that wasn't true. And I said, why'd you put it there? Because she said, it sounds better. And I said, I won't do it.
What can I ask? What was the line?
I don't remember, man, because I threw away most of what the edits were, and I was like, I had a very strong vision for this book. I had a very strong vision for the original one. And also now that I have all this connection with my readers and all this communication with my readers, I know what they're asking for because they asked me for it. So I'm giving them the book, the answers that they asked for.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hiring is hard. Hiring great people is almost impossible in today's world with only 3% unemployment. But it's a new year, the perfect opportunity to take your business to the next level by hiring the right people. Finding qualified candidates, again, can be challenging. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter.com/James makes it easy. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. ZipRecruiter is definitely the tool I would use to hire people. And just to do a little experiment, I signed up for ZipRecruiter to apply for jobs. And it's very interesting to see the kind of opportunities that ZipRecruiter is emailing me. More on that on another episode. But right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/James. That's ZipRecruiter.com/James, James. ZipRecruiter.com/James. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. So let's say someone's in this situation. You had this breakup, and we could maybe get more in the weeds in that in a second, but whether or not you want to. But what was like the first exercise you did? You realize, okay, you're known for the book Love Yourself. You realize you were somehow disconnected from it during this period. What was the first exercise you did to get yourself back on track?
Well, the funny thing is, this experience, and I shared, I was so deeply embarrassed at myself for letting myself get there internally, for falling apart like this. Because I know better, right? I should have been doing the work. I know better. And regardless of the amount of pain I was in, I knew better. Yet I wasn't doing it. It's almost, and so I didn't go about it the way I should have. And I write about that. I'm like, look, and even though I didn't, it still works, right? But it's like it goes back to the very basics. Here are the fundamental basics of loving yourself, right? The first is forgiving yourself. You got to forgive. If you're going to go into the future, you got to let go of the past. So I have a very simple exercise that I do to forgive myself.
What were some of the things you had to forgive yourself of?
Fucking excuse my language, anything, man. And look, it doesn't matter. You can sit there and forgive yourself for it being raining outside. Doesn't matter.
No, but I was trying to think about this. I don't know what I would forgive myself for.
Try the exercise, man. See what comes up.
I did. I couldn't. It felt weird forgiving myself of things. Not that. I don't know why.
Okay. I mean, that's great. Maybe you don't carry any weight, like
no,
I did. I did, man. And I do.
Like, what was an example of something you forgave yourself for?
Man, I don't know. For maybe like there were times like where maybe I failed, or I didn't give enough, or whatever I was holding against myself. That's the thing. It really doesn't matter. The whole point of this exercise is not to like think of what is someone else forgiving themselves for. It's the point is, what is the weight that I'm carrying, and to feel it and then finally let go. That's what the exercise does. And it's actually a very simple one, and it actually is freeing. And then from there, you go on and say, okay, now it comes down to commitment. I'm going to commit to myself. I'm going to make a vow to love myself. And it's because you've let go of what you're holding yourself, now you can actually commit. Now it's committing from a free and open space. And then the rest is, how do you do it? And that's the internal work. And it all starts with, people, one of the criticisms I got with the original book was, the guy just says, go around saying to yourself, I love myself, I love myself. That's where I realized also I had failed, because that's not the point. That was just the very, very tip of the beginning. That was just the very basic thing that I started doing when I was at bottom, which was, I was like, well, let me just try. I didn't know what to do, so let me try telling myself that. But you start that, what you start doing is you start building like a little mental groove in your brain, like neurons that wire together, fire together, right? You're just building a strong mental groove. And then you add feeling. Because look, we do manufacture our feelings. We're way more in control of feelings than we realize. We can literally sit here and shift our state if we really wanted to. You start doing it slowly, gently, and before you know it, you're actually walking around thinking and feeling love for yourself. And that in itself is a beautiful thing. But then you move forward. You add a meditation, like for me, it's 7 minutes long. And these days I'm actually doing it 5 minutes long. That's it. Nothing major, once a day. And then you take another level, you do in front of a mirror. That's it. And then, I've added, then what I've done is in this book, I'm also added all these different nuances that I do you can take it to the next level, right? That I've actually learned since I first wrote the book to this point. Because at this point, and I never finished the question you asked, which was, why expand it? So the first was like, look, I knew this book, I had held back a lot, and I'm getting the cushion readers, and people are stumbling as well. Even though as much as it's helping, people are stumbling. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks was how to make it last. How do I create the system that I've actually used that whenever I use it over time, it just works for long periods of time. It's just my own personal laziness that eventually I start coasting, right? So that was one. But then the second thing was, this book was self-published on Amazon. Amazon's big in the United States and a couple of Western countries. Outside of that, no real presence as far as like Kindle goes or whatever. But I was getting emails from all over the world. So people were torrenting this book, which is okay. But that's a hell of an honor. People actually taking the time to pirate your book, which is actually kind of cool, and all over the world. And then some of them had actually started translating it, putting it out because this book is too important. I got to share it, which kind of annoyed me because they were like, "Oh, I'm going to put my name on it." I'm like, you have no idea what it takes to write a book. How I literally bleed and sweat for every word. And you just, because you translated it, probably a crappy translation, right? And you put your name on it and you think that signifies that you've done the work. It really bothered me. But second was, look, there's a need for this book out there. A lot of people reached out. I would get a lot of emails from women saying, I want to get this for my mother, but she doesn't speak English. Can you make that happen? And I also realized I owe it to this book. I feel like a strong responsibility to this book. I owe it to this book to put it out in the world in a bigger way so that it goes off and does its thing. There's no more of these Kamal holding back. Kamal's only put it on Amazon. People are copying it, putting their own versions on it, put their name on it. It's just like this haphazard thing. Let me really put out what I really want to say. It's been 7 years. I've learned a lot since then. I've grown a lot since then. I have a lot more to say on this subject that actually is really helpful. So I can't do that on my own. Even in today's world, with self-publishing and all that, you can't. You got to go through a publisher. You got to get foreign rights deals, and then
let's talk about that for a second, because I do think for many people, and obviously a million people agree, that's how many books were self-published last year, roughly. I do think self-publishing is often the best way. But sometimes you need to, even if you, like for me, I've published through mainstream publishers, my first 5, 6, 7, 8 books. Then I self-published a bunch of books. Now for my very next book, I'm doing a mainstream publisher again. I think it's important every now and then to recognize the pros and cons of both. But what is the pro?
I'll tell you, there's pros and cons. So when I was meeting different publishers with my agent, right, most of them, I got the sense they would look at me like, here's a marketable quantity. I'm a very marketable guy. This book is very easily marketable. How do we make money? We're going to make money off this, right? I mean, look, I've been in business long enough. I can figure people out when I'm sitting across the table and you're doing a deal. It's very, very, it becomes very easy, right? So, but then I met Harper One, which is a division of HarperCollins, and they published The Alchemist, which is my favorite book of all time. And Gideon Weil, who was the guy who was the acquiring guy there, and his editor, Sidney Rogers, had a meeting with them with my agent, and I walked away thinking, oh my God, they get the book. He sat there and explained the book to me in a way better than I'd explained to myself.
Yeah, what did he say that really impressed you?
I don't remember, man. I'm sorry. I'm killing
remember.
you.
What's wrong with your memory? You're getting older.
Look, man, I was almost dead. Basically
That's
dead 3
true.
months ago. I'm still healing. So I got some.
You got an excuse.
Yeah. But what they did was they got it. And what I wanted was a partner. I wanted someone who would work with me in getting this book out in a way that actually this book deserved. And I knew that if I had the right partner, I could focus on just creating the best book I could, and they would focus on getting it out in the best way they could.
And you trust that, because that was always my initial, not so much my current thing. My current thing's in the middle, but you trusted that they would do it and not just say it.
I took a much lower advance than I would have, than I was willing to go with them, honestly. I took a bet on them. And you know what? It's completely paid off. They love this book. They're so, like, look, the it went down to like the cover. They came up with the cover. I remember telling them, like, look, don't make this look like a regular self-help book cover, because I'm not a self-help guy. I'm a guy who does stuff, who's making a statement, who's sharing something from his experience.
Right. Like, and by the way, the cover, just to describe it, looks like kind of a Banksy sort of cover. And it does look like the sort of cover that if you are walking the bookstore, you could potentially see this on the front table and you'd be curious enough to pick it up, as opposed to just some self-help thing like, the power of forgiveness, and it's all in some fancy new age script.
I'm not really a fan of self-help, because I think most of it comes from theory. It's very easy to write, to tell someone what to do from theory or what we think we should do. It's very easy to tell someone how to get in shape. But it's another thing to have been fat, out of shape, to get chiseled and share that journey and share the nuances and also the suffering and then the overcoming that suffering.
Well, I think
that's real.
I think this is an important part of writing, which is that writing is not a cooking recipe. Writing is storytelling, and your everything here comes out of the storytelling, and then you realize, oh, this is how it works. This is how he did it.
Also, I'm a writer. I fundamentally care about the craft of the written word. Like, I'm a writer first, the venture capital, all this stuff second. Like, I was put on this earth to write. Books saved me when I was a child. They were my refuge, and to be able to write books. And I work obsessively on the craft of writing. Like, every single word, every single comma, every word in here has been written and rewritten and rewritten, and so much has been thrown out. Like, when I sold it to them, and they came back to me with their editorial, they come back with like this big, large edit. I looked at it, I read it, and I had a call with them and with Sydney. And to her credit, I was like, look, I can't do this. This is not the book I wrote. You've turned this into a self-help book. I never set out to write an average self-help book. I set out to write this book. And this book works for a reason, because it's not your average self-help book. It's a real book. It's an honest book. So I'd taken all her work that she'd done for like weeks, and I just said, I'm not going to do it. And to her credit, and Richard really was like, okay, I chose the right partner. She's like, okay, go do what you got to do. You understand your readers. And I just kind of went at it. And when I turned in what I did, she was like, yeah, you're right. Because it's a very interesting lesson, James. When we feel a responsibility towards something or something that we really care about, we want cut corners. There's no way. If they had said, no, it's going to be this way, I would have like got my lawyer involved and broken that contract. I would have refused to publish.
I think that takes a lot of courage. Like, I feel like there's always the temptation to self-sabotage and say, okay, well, I'm going to go along with their suggestions, but then if it doesn't work, it's their fault, not mine.
No, this book is too important. That's the thing. That's the lesson there, James. When you have something that's more important than you, that's more important than my ego. If it was my ego, I would have just continued self-publishing. I would, I was making, look, I make good money doing other things, but I was making good money off this book, and I owned all of it. Yeah. Right. And I actually went with a lower advance. And advance, you got to remember, is just an advance of royalties. In the end, is what's the book going to make? But I wanted them because they understood the book, and I also could tell that they cared about it enough that they were willing to work with me as kind of like that. The guy who was obsessed on just crafting this book to his vision.
Well, also, I feel like, and you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I sort of feel like if something excites you, you feel it inside. You say, oh, this would be, like, you probably felt like this was the right moment to pursue this expanded version of this idea based on what you had been through, based on what you've learned, based on where you were as a writer. And so that was exciting you. And if you do, and that kind of creates this compass almost in your heart. And if you veer from the direction that, this almost sounds too wishy-washy, but if you veer from the direction that compass is telling you, it just doesn't feel good. And I think you stayed on target. You stayed on compass.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it was the original version, putting it out, that was purely mine, right? That taught me, like, look, what I had originally thought of worked, right? And also then all the feedback from readers and learning from them what
Right.
they
So you had
needed.
that mountain of experience
I did.
and feedback.
And in the end, you got to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You got to trust your gut as the creator. In the end, a creator has to trust their gut more than what anyone else says around them.
Well, you have this quote. It's a great quote because I live my own writing this way. You say, if it scares me, there is magic on the other side. And I think people, and you mentioned it about this book this expanded version was very personal. You were almost afraid what people would think of you.
Oh, I very much am.
Yeah, I still think if you're not scared of what people think of you, you probably shouldn't do it, because then you're not doing anything unique. If you're just doing something that's in the same club as everyone else, oh, hey, we're all in the same club now. Nice to see you. Good to see you here. Then it's no good. There's no reason for somebody to buy your book. They could just buy anyone else's book who's in that club. But if you say something that scares you, that means almost by definition, it's going to be unique. I feel like vulnerability, this is going to sound Machiavellian, but vulnerability is a price you pay for freedom. So you're vulnerable, and then that allows you to be free in this new category you create. So people will say, oh, he talks about this. No one else does. They buy the book, but now you're in this new area, this new free area where you're allowed to say what you were afraid to say.
Yeah, people use that word a lot. I prefer the word just be real. Like, that's one thing, I have an obsession with writing what is true. What is the truth? What is the fundamental emotional truth? And in the end, beyond that, I have no desire for anyone to read my journal. I don't write my journal. I don't write
But
my...
vulnerable could be, it's not like you say everything. It's not like radical honesty. It's just sort of like what you feel. All storytelling is some sort of vulnerability, so that you let people into your life a little bit so that they become on your side in terms of how you get out of this difficult situation you put yourself in.
Well, it's also like, in the end, it's like, what's of value? You go and strip away every word that's not of value. Like, I literally go word by word and stripping words that are not of value. Like, even after this, our last podcast that we did, we were talking about how basically was, died from severe trauma, just a few months ago. I was in severe narcotics when I got out, and the surgeon said, like, if anyone qualifies, right? And narcotics are good. They take away the pain, they dull you, they make you care less about the pain. And within a week, I went off from cold turkey, and I was in a significant pain, like significant. Why did I go off cold turkey? I'm not that crazy. Like, I would have taken them, but I was getting the early galleys of this book, and I had to go review them and go word by word to make sure like things didn't get changed around. Because then every time they send you one, that every version something gets moved around or copied, or someone's put in words, which I can immediately go through and recognize a word that's not mine. It's really funny. I've done that. It's creepy, but because I wrote every word and I care about every word, but I couldn't do that on those narcotics. Maybe I could, but I didn't want to. I wanted my mind to be clear, so I went off them. It's very interesting when you.
What were the narcotics?
I'm not gonna ask me the names. I just know, the usual, the Percocets and this and that. I was also on IV ones. I went clean, just completely just stopped, because the moment I got that in my inbox, I was like, okay, I got to work on this. I stopped, and it was a really interesting lesson. Like how when you have something you care about so deeply, that's so important, that's bigger than you. This book is bigger than me. This book's going to be around long after I'm gone. Right. And it's going to continue changing lives and people I've never met. Right. So I owed it to this book to not focus on my pain, to get beyond the pain and give it everything I had. And that comes from like that, that's so important, as when you create content, you have your vision and you care more about this than your little self.
So like you were going through this breakup and you were getting into that dark spot again, that when I knew you in 2012, when you were going through that, and you initially wrote the earlier Love Yourself. What does it mean to love yourself? It's not like an ego thing. It's not like, oh, I'm the greatest.
No, it's actually interesting. It's not being selfish. A lot of people, I've met people who told me they love themselves, and and they use it as justification for selfish actions, which I think is emotional laziness. That's
I agree, and I think I had the same reaction on Choose Yourself. Everyone's like, "Oh, that's a pretty selfish title," but they don't realize you've got to take care of yourself on the inside in order to help. It's sort of like that cliche, like you have to make your bed before you can save the world.
And I think honestly, when you love yourself, at least I've known with myself and other people I've known, when you love yourself, you're way more loving and giving to others rather than trying to be loving and giving to others. You just do, because you also realize the price everyone pays. You realize the price you've paid, and you don't want others to pay the price.
What do you mean the price that you've paid?
Like the price that you pay when you're not loving yourself or when you are being selfish. Others pay the price for it, and there's no need for others to pay the price for our own internal shittiness. You just realize there's no need. Like you just become, when you love yourself, you become kinder and more loving to others. It's really, really interesting. So it's not being selfish. It's not being narcissistic. It's the opposite of narcissism, actually. Narcissism is an obsessive, like almost like a dark focus on oneself, but portraying out the opposite out to kind of like have control or to, well, I don't even know. Like I'm no expert in narcissism, but I've met a couple, and I never thought to for a second, I'm like, oh, this person loves themselves. It was quite obvious. It was quite the opposite.
And so it's almost like this superpower, loving yourself, because you're instantly able to protect yourself, like put up boundaries where needed. Like there's always issues like, oh, I don't know how to say no. It's often because people don't internally love themselves enough. They think everyone will hate them, and that will affect their own view of themselves because they don't have that internal strength. And it also allows you to handle difficult situations better because some difficult situation doesn't have to tamper with how you feel your internal happiness and your internal success.
Yeah, it comes down to an internal thing, we're always walking around trying to control our outside when really the only thing we can truly control in life is our inside. And when you develop like a solid foundation on the inside, at least when I've had a solid foundation on the inside, the outside just works. And you don't get to let yourself, or I don't let myself get buffeted by life.
Can you give me a specific example? Like once you started getting back into the practice and you started to move past this breakup in this specific situation, I know you really had a lot of situations.
Let's go back to the original. Let's go to something really close that happened recently. Really basically dying horribly, almost dying painfully, horribly, and still in pain and recovering from a freak accident that, for all I know, the surgeon screwed up. I went in for elective surgery. That should not have happened, right? It was hard. Trauma is hard. Physical trauma is hard. And yet, I was talking to this guy the other day and he said, look, you gotta, and I was like, he's like, look, you gotta realize, I know people who, if their car breaks down, their entire day is shot. You actually are really like solid and giving and positive. And given that you're like talking to me and you're in pain right now, in physical pain, and then a couple of months ago you were in unbearable pain, and even then you were like positive, you were making people around you feel good. Like what, that says something. And I thought about it. I was like, thanks. First of all, thanks for telling me that because I never thought of it that way. And second of all, it's kudos to who I am. It's kudos to who I've become. And I think part of it comes from this. Part of this comes from always working on my inner self. That shows effects, in the hard times in life. Like look, man, if you want to qualify a test, I was tested 3 months ago, right? I'm still like recovering and rebuilding my body, and I'm, and I have rough moments. Physical pain is a hard beast. And I've never gone back on the narcotics, and I'm getting better, but it's a hard beast, and you got to face this beast. You got to face, because when you're in pain, it brings up all sorts of things, right? But when you're working on yourself, like it kind of takes those away because there's something deeper. There's something more still, something more, and love is not this walking around all the time feeling happy and jumping and shouting from the rooftops. Love is more of a lightness, of a solidness, of a trust in oneself, of peace.
So what are some, like you said, there were some nuances now to the practice.
There's a lot of nuances.
Like what are some of the nuances you could freely say?
Look, they're in the book. there's a lot of nuances to each part, then even down from like every part of the forgiveness exercise to how to write to what the vow, the commitment is, to even the mental loop and how to start, what not to go get carried away into,
And I
to
think
the
some of the physical
meditation.
exercises, like the breathing, I don't think that was in the initial book.
No, this is like 7 years of experience layered on top of the original book. Like, because I continued working and refining. That's one thing I'll say I have is I'm always working on myself to be better. Even in the laziness, I'll work on something else, And so like even things like this is a beautiful practice where once you're doing this, a way to just keep on reinforcing it throughout the day, 10 breaths. Wherever I am, I'll stop and I'll pause. In the Uber here, I was doing that, right? I'll stop and I'll pause and I'll take 10 deep and purposeful breaths. That's important, right? So it's not just your average breath. And we're going to breathe throughout the day anyway, whether we want to or not, right? So 10 deep and purposeful breaths where with the inhale, I feel light coming in. I feel love coming in for myself. And with the exhale, all I do is I feel gratitude. So inhale love, exhale gratitude. 10 breaths. That's it. Done. Move on. Do this throughout the day. And you know what? It really shifts the state of the day. It really shifts the state inside, but shifts the state outside. But
Does it last?
well, when you're doing these practices, all this is doing, this is reinforcing. It's like working out and then eating healthy. They compound, they build upon each other, which is another thing I build upon here. I'm like, look, here's the whole practice. Here's how it compounds. Here's how you put it into place. And so that it all works. It's not like just do this one. It's not like, hey, only go and do squats, or hey, only go, eat healthy, or this particular kind of food. It's more like put these together and you have yourself a complete program, a complete thing that's worked for me, that's worked for the readers I've shared it with. And it just makes you better. Just experience, just try it and experience the magic for yourself. Our life, like as I learned recently, and I've known this, is really, really short and can end really, really quickly before we know it. So why not have given us this experience?
So once you started, you had this breakup, you had this trauma, you've been going through this practice because you were also, not only have you been living it since 2012, but you were writing about it and you recognized you needed to live it even more. What did you start noticing about yourself once it started to kick in this time around? Like what?
Yeah. Oh, that's an
changed?
interesting question. You start having internal ease about things. Like that's what it is. An internal ease happens. That the shift just happens, and it doesn't happen right in the beginning. It's like it's like if you start working out. I love using this metaphor because I love working out. Right? If you start working out and you haven't worked out before, one day you're gonna walk in front of the mirror and you're gonna notice a change. You don't notice the first day or the third day. It's not like if trainer's going to say on day number 17, you're going to know, right? But one day you walk in front of the mirror and you notice a change. Same thing here. You notice it in your mind. It's beautiful. You're like, something has shifted. Because what you're doing is you're layering these grooves. You're layering in the neural patterns, right? You're just like deepening them. And eventually they become like more of your way of being, and they fire more, they run more. And then, so it was like more for the first step is actually like an internal ease, It's very interesting. Yeah, that's a great question, James. It's an internal ease. I think that's the easiest way to describe it.
And I noticed with you in the past few months, like you had your surgery. It's like, gosh, now it was like 3 or 4 months ago. When was that?
No, it's less than 3 months. I mean, look, I'm still,
It's like October, early October.
October 2nd. I'm still, I'm still recovering, man.
But I noticed, it was easier for you to say no to high stakes things, and it just kind of blew over really quickly. Like it was almost like you had this superpower of saying no.
Oh yeah, because I said no to some big things, and because quickly, very well what matters. What matters is
it's
life
all like
and
the
love.
world organized itself around your no.
Yeah,
and then I think
because
also,
they were getting in the way of my life or love.
Yeah,
and my love, like a love, or my life, or like doing what I know was right. Like one of them, I was with people I knew they weren't doing right things, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of it.
I sort of feel like also, like I feel for myself when I'm not taking care of myself or not doing my own practice. I find myself sometimes dependent on other people's decisions for my happiness. And I think as you get more into this practice of loving yourself, that happens less. Like you're able to sort of blow off when decisions happen that could affect you negatively, but you lean into it until it turns positive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I felt like that was happening to you a bit as well. Like, okay, some things didn't happen exactly as you wanted, but then you're able to lean into it and find the positives, and the positives start to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you wrote this book, for instance.
Well, this book was written before this year.
Right.
I
even
worked on it
then,
last year, but then during this year, I've been writing it, rewriting it. But by the time I had the surgery, I turned in the final draft. Then it was just galleys where you could just change a word here and there. That was it.
But even a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever. So people go through, that's the thing too, is people read a self-help book, or they go on some regime and they think, okay, that's it, I'm done. But like you said, it's all the time, or else these muscles atrophy. The love yourself muscle atrophies, and bad things start to happen again, and you have to constantly
Well, look,
bounce
I don't
back
know
from
if bad things or good things happen or don't happen. Things are going to happen in life anyway. It's like, who are we being through it? That's the control we have. And who we're being through it, and ironically, actually does control a lot of the external, And, if storms come, are we broken apart by them? Or do we just ride through them knowing that this is a storm and my ship is stronger than this and I will get through this?
So, I am curious though about some of the specifics, and like in some of the story that you tell. Like again, you intersperse sort of the practice and the different nuances, which by the way are amazing. Like you're in the first book from 2012, you're talking about how you pulled yourself up to the mirror and you started repeating "love yourself," and gradually, you through this practice and other practices, you literally cured yourself from illness. Here,
hey, you're saying a singular now rather than plural. You were saying illnesses
right.
before.
Yeah, it wasn't 10 plagues. It was mostly one or two. But here you have, rituals and exercises, and try this. You have so many different like practical things that you
And all
did.
these things that I do.
Right. It's
that
part
work.
of the story. It's not
Yeah.
just like you teaching. You're not a teacher in this book. This is your story.
I'm not a teacher. I'm
Right.
just a guy who does stuff and now is sharing it. That's it.
So what do you think, why do you think this breakup, I'm just asking you about the story, and you address this in the book, and I encourage people obviously to read it and see how the nuances intersperse. But why do you think this breakup really affected you more than other situations recently? And again, you mentioned before, this wasn't the only thing. You just used this as the story, as kind of the...
Yeah, I don't want to get people caught up in like breakup. There's a reason why I share that story. I have no desire to share my dirty laundry, right? But in that process, I also share childhood stuff and all the stuff that came up and how I overcome it. There's a reason for using it. Why this? Because I loved her, man. And I still do. I love her with everything. When you do, you're going to feel.
Yeah, but after a certain amount of time, it's too much. You have to move forward. And
well, that's not what the book is about. The book is about that. I've shared that experience, right?
Right.
While I was going through it, right? It has to, I shared that experience of what I was doing to get better internally, because it serves the book, it serves the reader.
And then was there a moment when you realized, okay, when you started to get more centered and focused on yourself instead of, oftentimes when people have a breakup, the breakup becomes the center of their mental or emotional universe. And that's the gravitational pull that they're orbiting around. Do you feel like this was a way to kind of pull yourself back to your normal gravitational pull internally on yourself?
Well, look, doing the practice is the way to do it. The breakup made me go back to the practice, right? But like I can do that without a breakup.
Right.
That's part of the point of this book is don't coast. Like here's how to do it. But look, don't coast, because eventually you will go back to letting storms defeat you when they really shouldn't. Storms are just storms that pass through. And the only thing you control is your insight, is yourself. That's the one thing you can work on. That no matter what, you read about POWs in Vietnam, 7 years, just what got them through, what got Viktor Frankl through Auschwitz. It was, he had a whole psychotherapy, what was it called, logotherapy based on it. And that was meaning, right? People who had meaning, who had purpose, were the ones who made it through Auschwitz more often than the ones who gave up were who didn't. It comes down to an internal thing. It gave me many different things. Like this book gave me meaning to actually get better after the surgery, to work on something rather than focus on the pain. So we can have things bigger than us. So for loving myself was one thing I discovered on my own, very accidentally, by the way. Never set out to never once thought, hey, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to learn to love myself. Like, never thought that. Never even thought that that was a thing or necessary, right? 2012, who in Silicon Valley was talking about that? I was the guy talking about it 2012, actually, funny enough. But after I discovered it, yeah, now I'm rambling.
No. I mean, it's all relative. It's all relevant in that I think for myself, the reason I wrote Choose Yourself is because I found myself too dependent on validation from others. And so I said to myself, it's really important that I essentially love myself instead of having to depend on the validation of others, whether it was a book publisher or a simple like on Twitter or a woman I was dating or a community of people who were either accepting me or rejecting me. Yeah, like I go through it all the time, because when you put yourself out there a little bit, you're going to get rejected a lot. You're going to get hurt a lot. If you're going to go on YouTube, you can't read the comments on YouTube because it's always like, oh, why are they having this homeless guy on CNBC again? And I'm like, I'm not homeless. And loving yourself does build kind of a spine so you could stand up to these, trials and tribulations in life.
It's also just a beautiful thing to feel. We're feeling creatures. We walk around feeling a lot of crappy emotions during the day. A lot of
people say 80%. You think, I forgot who it was. Jack Canfield, who's been on this podcast, says you think 50,000 thoughts a day and 40,000 of them are negative.
And so, like when you work on this practice of loving yourself, a lot of those shift. Why not just give yourself that? If anything, we're stuck in our heads anyway. Why not make it just? You know what? I really like my inside. I really like the inside of me. I like the outside of me too, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I've been around people who are, by every measure of the world, like, you want to envy them. But I've also figured out what their inside is like. I'm like, there's no way you could pay me enough money to beat them.
I think that's
right?
the key is sometimes you envy qualities of a person, but when you actually say, oh, what happens if I switch bodies with this person forever and I can't reverse it? I don't know of anybody I would actually switch with, even if I'm envious of them in certain ways.
I wouldn't want their mind. Like the mind of mine, I've grown quite fond of, and I like the mind of mine who does this stuff, who loves himself, and to feel this way, and even who's gone through hard stuff in life, but then it's like, shoot, I know better. I got to bounce back, and then works on himself, gets better. It's really nice to be able to like yourself on the inside. Like who you are on the inside and feel that. It's a really good way to be.
Do you feel that has been growing with you, particularly like you've been indulging in the material so much, plus bouncing back from all these different
because you grow with it. It's like application and reapplication, right? It gets stronger and stronger.
So you gave one simple exercise, which is the breathing. So
I would say if someone's going to do a takeaway and is not going to get the book, that is one thing to do, the 10 breaths. But I would say, like, look, if you can, give it to yourself to do the full practice. And the 10 breaths is almost like you're reinforcing it, you're reinforcing it, you're reinforcing it. This is like, this 7 years of thought. This book is not like 1 year in the making. It's 7 years of thought, a lot of thinking, a lot of notes that I've taken over the years. And I write a lot, pulling it out and then just really leaving in only what was the gold, that matters. So if you're gonna do this, do the whole thing. You owe it to yourself. Go all in. I really believe that. Like, if you make a commitment, go all in. And make a commitment to do this.
And why not make a commitment to this?
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you. It's only going to make you better. Love yourself. It's only going to make you better.
So what? Okay, this book, I'm holding the hardcover in my hands. It's out in the bookstores by the time this podcast is released. What are you working on now?
That's a good question.
I feel like you've been going through a transition the past few months. Like, now you've been working on this book, you've been working on other stuff. All of that's kind of taken a break. This book is out, so it transforms your view of this book.
I mean, look, right now I'm healing from the surgery, so I'm just kind of like taking care of myself and healing. And I'm very curious what it's going to be like when this book is out, because now I've put out the real version. Now I've put out the version that can go globally. They're selling foreign rights like crazy. There's
That's
some
great.
far rights like in places like in all these different Eastern European countries, then Taiwan, and then obviously the European countries. But it's really random, like these countries that are coming up that are just getting their hands on the latest manuscript and are buying it from HarperCollins. So this is the book. What's amazing, James? I almost left the planet, a couple of months ago, literally a couple of months ago. And part of me still is like, wow, I'm going to get to be around to watch this go out to the world. What will that be like? I have no idea. I'm more curious about that what's that going to be like?
I can't wait, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad you're on this podcast once again talking about it. I feel like I played my role in the first book. The day it came out, I wrote an article. I'll do the same here, and I'm excited because I sort of feel like we grew up together in some of these concepts, and I'm excited for this to get out there. And I myself have used your technique hundreds or thousands of times, and it's helped me out when situations have been incredibly difficult for me. And so I'm grateful to you, Kamal, for how this has helped me and for your friendship and all the times we've talked about these issues, either on the podcast or in person or whatever. So love yourself like your life depends on it. Where is this going to be? Is this going to be in bookstores everywhere?
Everywhere.
Is it going to be in the airport bookstore?
I hope so. That is interesting. That either you pay to play or you get enough sales and then they place them there.
And you got an audio book, obviously.
Yeah. I read the whole thing. And that was actually
That's brutal.
Like a month and a half after surgery. And this is when I could if I stood, I was in a significant amount of pain. And I feel more comfortable standing. I don't like sitting a lot. So I stood and read that thing because I knew I'd be able to give it more if I stood. And the producer who's produced like a lot of best-selling audiobooks, I think one he got a Grammy for, he's like, this is one of the best I've ever done. I'm so happy to be a part of this. That was really nice.
What else are they doing for marketing this?
They're putting me in a James Altucher podcast.
That was a smart decision on their part. Because
That's
otherwise,
it.
if they hadn't called me, I wouldn't have let you on.
That's it. Book's out. Go on James's show. That's it.
I do think the podcast tour, as opposed to the book tour, is very interesting. But the good thing about a book tour is they put you in the bookstores that they know the New York Times bestseller list looks at. So is there any sense of that? Are you going to visit any bookstores?
No. None of that, because I was come from surgery, they kind of said look, we want to make you travel a lot, let's just because look, this is a book that's just going to continue to spread and spread and spread. The original version, people are just buying dozens of copies and giving them out. So
I think the same is going to happen here. And by the way, this is a much more prettier book than the 2012 book.
And honestly,
there's 40,000. How many words altogether is this? This is 10 times bigger than the original book.
No, it's 36,000.
Okay, so it's 4 times bigger, 4.5 times bigger.
But remember, it's the quality of the content. And I've really worked hard to make sure that every word here matters. And it really does. And, the feedback I've gotten from people, people at HarperCollins are actually just taking bringing copies as gifts for their friends and family for the holidays. And one of them was telling me, I don't do that with the books I work on, but this I need to give to my friends and family, which is really sweet.
So Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant. What are 5 or 6 other books people should read after they read this?
I don't know, man. Just it depends on what you want in life.
What books have you read lately?
Honestly, I've taken a break from reading. I've just been doing a lot of thinking and noodling, and I've taken a break from reading because I'm kind of letting my mind just play and expand because it's playing over different concepts and maybe what the next thing I'll write, which I'm not sure yet. I'm just letting my mind explore.
Well, we in the past few months we've explored quite a few intense experiences you've had. One is your second by second description of almost dying and then recovering from that, and before that, your experiences with this very specific sect of Buddhist monks that you spent some time with. Both of those were fascinating episodes, and keep on exploring, Kamal. And I've read this book now twice. I've got notes all over it. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. I know I'm going to, so I hope the reader does. And Kamal, once again, thanks for sharing your intense experiences with us.
Thanks for having me again, James. I love you.
Thanks, Kamal.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.